We all want high-performing teams. We chase metrics. We set targets. We hold endless meetings. We reward outcomes, demand accountability, and hope that excellence somehow becomes a habit. But here's the truth most organizations won't tell you. Performance doesn't start with skills. It starts with trust. You can have the most talented, experienced, intelligent individuals in the room. But if there's no trust between them, you don't have a team. You have a group of people working in silos, managing optics, and hiding behind performance reviews. And that's not high performance, that's fear in a suit. Real teams, great teams aren't built on resumes, they're built on relationships. They're not driven by pressure, they're driven by belief in one another. Trust is the foundation that holds everything up when things get hard, and make no mistake, they will get hard. Projects will fail, strategies will pivot, stress will rise, and in those moments, your ability to win won't come down to who's smartest. It will come down to who feels safe enough to speak up, own mistakes, challenge ideas, and have each other's backs. Build the argument. Trust is not just a soft value. It's not a buzzword for posters or HR manuals. It is a strategic advantage. When trust is present, communication becomes faster. Conflict becomes healthier. Collaboration becomes natural. People stop hiding, they stop pretending, and they start showing up fully. Because they know they won't be punished for being real. When trust exists, vulnerability becomes a strength, not a weakness, and that changes everything. It means your team isn't wasting energy covering mistakes, politicking, or protecting their image. They're spending that energy building, creating, solving, and pushing the mission forward. Without trust, even your best people will hold back. They'll play it safe, they'll avoid risk, they'll say what's expected instead of what's true. And over time, your culture will become cautious, closed, and brittle. Trust is built in small moments, in consistency, in leaders who admit when they're wrong, in teammates who check in when someone's struggling, in environments where feedback is a gift, not a threat. And most of all, in a shared belief that we're not here to compete with each other. We're here to succeed together. Trust is not something you sprinkle on top of success. It's not an afterthought or a luxury. It's not something you get around to once the team is hitting its numbers or meeting quarterly goals. Trust is the very first thing. It is the foundation, the bedrock upon which everything else stands. When teams begin without trust, they begin with suspicion, second, guessing, and silence. They walk on eggshells, they filter their words, and they look out for themselves rather than for each other. And when that happens, even the most talented group of individuals cannot operate as a true team. Because performance without trust is like building a house on sand. It might look impressive for a while, but it won't hold under pressure. Think of trust like oxygen in the room. You don't notice it when it's there, but you feel its absence immediately. A team without trust gasps for air. Every conversation becomes a negotiation, every request feels like a demand, and every mistake becomes a threat. People don't share ideas freely because they fear judgment. They don't ask for help because they fear being seen as incompetent. They don't offer feedback because they fear retaliation. And slowly, they start showing up with only a fraction of themselves. They do the minimum. They perform instead of contribute. They survive instead of thrive. Now contrast that with a team that starts with trust. When trust is present from day one, people lean in. They speak with confidence, not caution. They share ideas without fear of being shot down. They collaborate not because they have to, but because they believe in each other. In that environment, energy flows. Creativity surfaces. People challenge one another, not to compete, but to elevate. They don't hide their weaknesses. They offer them up so the team can fill the gaps. They don't hoard knowledge. They share it because success isn't a zero-sum game. What's powerful about trust is that it creates a sense of belonging. When people feel trusted, they feel safe. And when they feel safe, they give their best. Not because they're forced to, but because they want to. They show up fully without armor. They own their mistakes not out of fear, but out of a shared commitment to improve. They stretch themselves, take smart risks, and go the extra mile, not to impress a manager, but because they're invested in the mission and in each other. You cannot build a high-performing team by leading with pressure and performance metrics. You build it by creating an environment where people know that their voice matters, that their vulnerability won't be weaponized, and that their humanity isn't a liability, it's an asset. When trust is the foundation, everything else, performance, accountability, innovation, and resilience, has a place to grow, because trust doesn't make people soft, it makes them strong. It doesn't lower standards, it raises them. And the best part is, once trust is truly in place, people start holding themselves and each other to those standards willingly, consistently, and proudly. In every high-functioning team, performance is not just about skill, it's about safety, the kind of psychological safety that allows people to take risks, speak up, and show up without fear of being ridiculed or punished. Without psychological safety, there is no real performance. What you get instead is people hiding their ideas, withholding their concerns, and second-guessing every word that leaves their mouth. They operate from a place of fear, not from a place of purpose. And when fear leads, creativity dies. Initiative shrinks, innovation stalls, because nobody performs at their best when they're constantly looking over their shoulder. Psychological safety isn't just a nice-to-have. It's the heartbeat of real teamwork. When someone feels safe within a team, they're willing to raise a hand and say, "I don't understand," without worrying they'll be labeled as slow. They're willing to offer an idea that may not be perfect, knowing it won't be laughed out of the room. They're willing to question a process, challenge a direction, or admit when they're overwhelmed. That kind of transparency isn't weakness. It's what unlocks trust, speed, and growth, because now the team is operating with truth instead of assumption. They're solving the real problems, not dancing around the polite version. Without that safety, people shrink. They nod in agreement during meetings but quietly disagree in their heads. They watch things go wrong and say nothing because they don't want to be the one who makes noise. They focus more on avoiding mistakes than on achieving excellence, and that comes at a steep cost. When people don't feel safe, the team loses out on diverse opinions, on necessary challenges, on breakthrough thinking that only emerges when everyone feels free to contribute. What you're left with is groupthink, fake harmony, and a fragile kind of performance that looks good on the surface but is rotting underneath. Psychological safety doesn't mean lowering standards. It means raising humanity. It means saying, we will aim high, we will push hard, but we will do it in a space where people feel seen, heard, and respected. That's how trust takes root. That's how accountability becomes organic. Because when people feel safe, they don't avoid responsibility, they embrace it. They don't hide from feedback, they ask for it. They don't run from challenge, they run toward it, knowing they'll be supported even if they stumble. It starts with leadership. It starts with the tone at the top. When leaders model vulnerability, when they create space for open dialogue, when they reward honesty instead of perfection, they invite the team to do the same. That's when you start seeing people leaning in. That's when meetings become real. That's when performance starts to reflect potential, not fear. High-performing teams are not the result of high pressure. They are the result of high trust and high psychological safety working together. And without that foundation, even the most talented team will underperform, because no one can thrive in a space where they feel like their next mistake will define their value. In any workplace, feedback can be either a weapon or a gift. The difference lies in trust. In low-trust environments, feedback feels like judgment. It's delivered with sharp edges and received with clenched teeth. People brace themselves not because they're afraid of growth, but because they don't believe the person giving the feedback truly has their best interests in mind. They hear criticism and think, am I being pushed out? Am I not good enough? They go into defense mode, building walls, making excuses, shutting down emotionally, and in that space, feedback loses all value. It becomes something to avoid, something to survive, rather than something to embrace. But when trust is present, genuine, earned, mutual trust, feedback transforms. It becomes something entirely different. It becomes fuel. It becomes insight. It becomes a tool for elevation rather than condemnation. In a high-trust team, feedback is not a surprise attack, it's an act of care. It's someone saying, I see your potential and I want to help you get there. It's someone courageous enough to tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear. And when it's delivered from that place, it builds you instead of breaking you. We grow when we know we are safe to be seen fully, not just for our strengths, but for our rough edges too. Forming teams don't hide imperfections. They bring them forward, talk about them, work on them, and move through them. But that kind of honesty can only happen when there is a foundation of trust. You can't ask someone to be vulnerable in an environment that hasn't proven it can handle vulnerability. You can't ask for openness if every piece of feedback is used as a scorecard or stored away for a performance review. Trust is what makes feedback land softly and powerfully, like a hand reaching down to lift you up, not a hammer coming down to put you in your place. When teams trust one another, feedback is not a one-way street from the top down. It flows in all directions. Peers coach peers, junior team members share observations with senior ones, leaders invite critique instead of resisting it. And this open flow becomes a culture where no one's ego is more important than the team's progress. In that space, people crave feedback, not because they're insecure, but because they're committed. They want to sharpen their skills, refine their communication, improve their impact, and they trust that the team will help them do it with integrity and respect. Feedback, when rooted in trust, builds not just better performance, it builds stronger people. It reinforces the belief that everyone is working toward the same mission, that no one's feedback is meant to shame or undermine. Instead, it says, you matter. I see what you're capable of. Let's get you there together. It creates a shared standard of excellence that isn't enforced with fear but inspired by belief. When people feel that kind of support, they rise, not out of obligation but out of motivation. They stretch beyond comfort zones, not because they're pushed, but because they feel pulled toward a better version of themselves. There's a common misconception in the workplace that showing vulnerability makes you weak. That admitting uncertainty, asking for help, or revealing a mistake somehow disqualifies you from being a leader or a top performer. But in reality, vulnerability is not a crack in your armor at asterisk, is asterisk the armor. It's what separates transactional teams from transformational ones. It's what forges deep, unbreakable bonds between people who don't just work asterisk next asterisk to each other, but work asterisk with asterisk each other. Vulnerability is the doorway to trust, and trust is what makes high-performing teams possible. When someone on a team has the courage to be vulnerable, to say, I messed that up, or I'm struggling right now, or I need your help, they're not diminishing their credibility, they're building it. Because what they're really saying is, I care enough about this team and this mission to be honest. Vulnerability invites authenticity. It shows others that they don't have to pretend, posture, or perform. It gives them permission to exhale and show up as they are. And when even one person leads with vulnerability, it creates a ripple effect. It lowers the waterline on everyone's emotional iceberg, making space for real connection and real collaboration. In a culture where vulnerability is welcomed, you don't have people hiding mistakes or sweeping them under the rug. You have people owning them early, fixing them quickly, and learning from them openly. That saves time, reduces damage, and increases collective intelligence. It turns cover-ups into case studies. It turns failures into stepping stones. And more than anything, it builds a team where no one has to waste energy pretending to be perfect. They can focus that energy on growing, on innovating, on supporting one another, because the fear of being found out has been replaced by the confidence of being asterisk known asterisk. Vulnerability is also a powerful equalizer. It dissolves hierarchies when a leader is willing to say, I don't have all the answers. It doesn't make them less respected. It makes them more human, and people don't follow titles, they follow people. Especially people who have the humility to admit they're still learning and the strength to ask others to walk with them. That's the kind of leadership that creates loyalty, engagement, and emotional safety. Not because the leader is always right, but because they're always real. What's most remarkable about vulnerability is how contagious it is. When someone opens up, others follow. When someone shares their story, others feel seen. When someone is brave enough to be fully themselves, it creates a culture where others don't feel like they have to hide parts of who they are. And in that space, where the masks come off, where the walls come down, that's where teams become more than just productive. That's where they become powerful, because they're not just united by goals or roles. They're united by trust, by empathy, and by the kind of emotional connection that turns coworkers into comrades.